Okay. Well, thank you everybody for coming. I'm very happy to share some Dharma thoughts with you today. Um, I haven't done a prepared talk today. I'm finding my feet. As you know, I've only done a few Dharma talks so far, and I decided to try to just speak to you like we're having a conversation rather than doing some kind of lecture or speaking at you. So we'll see how it goes. And I would really like this to be quite interactive because the topic is right effort. And it's about putting the theory into practice is right effort. And so I think that it's very useful to actually look at real situations as they arrive and to deal with them. I did a talk a little while back with you about that it's a path of practice. And that we need to practice the skills, and we can't expect to be virtuosos without doing the practice. But right effort is what that practice actually is. And it's, I don't know about you, but for a long time, I didn't really understand what that particular factor of the Noble Eightfold Path really meant. But I felt that, there was so much work that gets to be done, and the suttas are full of it everywhere. But I never really understood it to go under that right effort category, because when you look at what right effort is, it's really quite simple. They talk about, you do what is required to make good states arise, and you do what is required to maintain good and beneficial states, and you do what is required that if bad states have arisen to actually make them cease, and you do what has to be done in order to stop bad states from arising. And that sounds really simple. and it doesn't sound very exciting. But really, I think that encompasses just about every sutta will talk about what you have to do this. And I think that going from the theory to the practice can be quite challenging in this regard. And I even didn't know how to talk about this for a long time, and I'd always talk about the work and the practice that needs to be done, and people would look at me a bit weird. And I'd talk about it as the contemplations and, sense restraint and these different types of things. But I never really knew how to frame it properly. So hopefully I can share some of the, insights that I've come to about this, and you can avoid some of the pitfalls that I fell into. That's my aim today. Is that okay? Okay. And as I said earlier, before everyone had entered the room, I'd really like to connect with you. And so if you are comfortable, switch your video on, because I don't want to talk at you today. I want to talk with you. Okay. Yes, very good. Okay. Hello, Piotr. Nice to see you.
Hello, nice to see you. Sorry for being late 2 minutes.
Oh, that's no problem at all. Okay, and so I'll rely on you, Piotr, to also ask me questions, because I've done no preparation today. It was very hard not to prepare, but I was lucky because I've been very busy today, and so I wasn't tempted. Excellent. Excellent. All right. So just give me an indication, how many of you are familiar with right effort or have thought about it, or how much how clear are you about what is involved there? You can hold up your fingers like from 1 to 10.
Yeah, I'm aware,
5.
and I think what is important is that it's connected
7.
to sati, that we should observe our mind and then we can put right effort. So I think this is a good place to start, because you said that you want me to ask things. So I think this is the great start would be to talk about connection of sati, sammasati with sammavayama, right mindfulness with right effort.
Okay. I'm just going to go back a little tiny bit because I want to set the scene as well. And because right effort is about taming the mind and skill development. Okay. And it's very important to do it in a balanced way. So the Buddha gives a simile of playing a lute, and he says that the strings shouldn't be too tight and they shouldn't be too loose. And this is quite a difficult thing to find. And we all have different personalities and different characters. Some are more casual and laid back, and others are more in the striving camp. Now, I've been in the striving camp for a long time and been a tyrant to my own mind. And that isn't a very balanced way to be, nor is it when you're too lazy and you don't care too much and you just sort of let everything go. So it's actually quite a big challenge to find a balanced approach. What is enough? And I found that you will have heard that often the untamed mind is called the monkey mind, right? And have you heard that?
Yes,
no,
yes.
Not really. Well, it's often referred to as the monkey mind. And we tend to think of naughty monkeys, but I find what's helped me have a more balanced attitude to right effort is viewing the mind as a little puppy. Okay, a cute little puppy that you bring home that wants to do the right thing, but it really isn't too sure about what to do. And in order to train it well, you have a loving relationship with it, a kind relationship with it, and you treat it nicely. You don't want it to be in fear. You don't want punishment. You try to actually teach it wisdom in a loving and kind and accepting manner. So you don't beat up the puppy. We'll come back to this again, but I just want to set that attitude that the little puppy and our untamed mind is sorry, I was just reading the chat and I've distracted myself again. So when we have the little puppy, we want it to do something, but the little puppy doesn't really know how to do it. Whether you're trying to teach it, toilet train it, and it wheezes and it poos on the carpet, you can't really be angry with it, okay? You have to train it. And in order to train it, you have to understand why it does things. And this is getting to Pyotr's point about sati and yoniso manasikara. So you have to understand how puppies work, right? And so it's a balance of love and discipline. And yes, I just want to keep that approach. And look, I'm just going to go back up the chat because somebody asked a question. Adrian asked a question, and I might just deal with that because I'll forget later on. And he asked, a friend asked me why Buddha's discipline is called discipline of the noble ones, and why is that word noble used everywhere? I have an intuitive understanding of it, but I wonder what that nobility means and how to become noble in lay life. Now, there's probably a correct doctrinal answer to this, but I'm just going to give you my take on it. And that is that it's about having had the intention to go on the path. So, for example, if you take the 5 precepts, or if you take more precepts, then you've made you've taken refuge in the triple gem and you're working towards it. Now, the noble ones, generally that will be the ones who are really seriously undertaking the Buddha's teachings. And typically noble ones is once you're a stream enterer. But if you're working towards it, you can also be included in that. So it's it's actually for people who are taking it seriously. And you can see that with regards to the types of right effort that you do. Some are very easy, some are very general, but it does get quite challenging if you're pushing it towards the further ends. And in thinking about this talk today, that very issue came up in my mind, because the things that you would push yourself to do if you were fully committed, and you were aiming for nibbana and this was your full-time occupation, that's one thing. But if you're living lay life and you're just maybe not even on the 5 precepts, or if you're on the 5 precepts, you'll be pushing yourself not quite as far and not quite as hard. You have to do the preliminary practices first. So I decided that for this talk, I'm going to basically aim it at people who are committed to the 5 precepts. Right, so that you're actually into sila and you're wanting to keep the 5 precepts rather than more. And this will come out as we talk about examples, because, for example, if you are on the 5 precepts, you may enjoy, you'll be enjoying a householder life. You'll have maybe a partner, children, all of those kinds of things. And they're good and wholesome and happy things. So you don't have to bring about disenchantment with those things if you're still wanting to live that way. And, that's quite a different practice than if you're actually wanting to be celibate and, take it in another direction. Then your right effort will involve other things. So, so does that make sense? Is that a good enough answer for Adrian?
Yes, thank you. I'm now wondering what the right effort means for lay people, so I'm very curious.
Okay. Well, I think the 5 precepts is a fantastic starting point. And when you think about what that involves, you know that in order to be able to keep the 5 precepts, you have to have certain states of mind. So you have to train yourself to have that kind of mind. So let's just talk about harmlessness and right speech. Let's use right speech. That's a nice and easy one. So that means, firstly, that thinking about how far back to go down the chain. Okay. Well,
go far.
By the time okay, so by the time you've gotten to the 5 precepts, you already have some right view. Okay, so you've already heard the words of the Buddha from somebody else, and you've already got an idea that there's lots of dukkha in the world, lots of suffering in the world, and you have a degree of faith in the Buddha that he knows what he is talking about, and you may have experienced it yourself, that when you behave well, you end up with a happier mind, less agitation. So you've already done that preliminary work, okay? And then... So let me just quickly go through the how it works with the Four Noble Truths and to get to right view. So the first noble truth is that there's a lot of dukkha in samsara, and you realize that this is the case, and you know that the external conditions are largely out of control. All right, you have and that existence is unsatisfactory, it's impermanent, and so you have adjusted your expectations of the world. You realize that it's not just the external conditions that will bring you happiness, but it's actually your internal processing, how you perceive, how you interact with the world that will yield results. Okay, so your expectations of the world have changed and your focus has changed. So you've got some yoniso manasikara, you're going to the root of the problem. It's not the problem of the things out there that are making me miserable. The problem is how I'm perceiving them, how I'm dealing with them, and therefore you're motivated and you have intention to actually do some work and align your perceptions with those of the Buddha. Then we come to the second noble truth, which is the cause of suffering. So you know how suffering arises, that it and the first noble truth and the second noble truth, that illustrates the problem. Okay, so you actually get an idea of what the problem is. So this is approximating right view. And then we have the third noble truth, which is that suffering can also cease, right? So what are the causes to make suffering cease? And the fourth one is the path to liberation. So the third and the fourth noble truths are about empowerment for liberation. So you actually have a solution to the problem. So the first two identify the problem, and the second two identify the solution to the problem. And this is really right view. So you're attributing the right causes to the problem. So you can actually start to do something. And this is where the sati and yoniso manasikara come into play. So the right view, you have an idea of what things lead to happiness and what things lead to suffering. You can tell the difference. Unless you have that, you wouldn't even be interested in sila, because sila, you know that acting well will lead to good and beneficial states, that it's being a friend to yourself and others, and you get many benefits from it. Okay, so that's the right view part of it. And because you have that, then you have right intention. And this is where we get to the 5 precepts. So you have the intention to actually keep them because you have enough right view to know that they will make your life better. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay. And with that right intention, unless you have the right intention, the right motivation, you will not put in any effort. Okay. So it's a prerequisite, really. Sorry, I'm just going to move this down. Okay. Okay, I'll come back to that question. Excellent. So with a Sila, you have non-remorse, non-agitation, and you also start to improve your karma, okay? This enables sati, sampajanya, and meditation, mindfulness, all to take place. So you need, if you're really agitated and pulled around all over the place, you won't even be able to apply those things. So these are the preliminaries that you need to put into place. So from there, so we've got the right view, right intention, the Sila factors, and then we get to the right effort, which is the things that I said, the giving rise to unarisen good states, maintaining the good states, doing what you have to do to make the bad states disappear, and doing what you have to do to ensure that the bad states don't arise. A sutta that really deals with this very well is Majjhima Nikaya number 2, the Sub-Asava Sutta, all the defilements. And I would suggest that you read it and you contemplate it, because that's really a roadmap for how you can deal with specific things. Now, it's quite general, it's very theoretical, and I'm not going to go into it now, but that's just there. And maybe in the future, we can look at the Sub-Asava Sutta and go through it. It's a wonderful sutta for training. But today I just want to keep it very, very practical. Are any of you familiar with it? Yes? Excellent, excellent, fantastic, fantastic. All right. So, as I said, going from theory to practice is actually quite challenging, and it's nothing, it's very normal for this to be quite difficult. And I think we underestimate the difficulty of it. And I've noticed that throughout my career in psychology and in administration and all kinds of things. It's very difficult to go from theory and to apply it to the thick of things that we have. And as I said, I'll just reiterate, don't be a tyrant to your mind. It's a little puppy. Treat it with kindness and discipline, and always you have to keep reinforcing the message. The little puppy won't learn immediately, but you have to be consistent. That's a really important thing, because if you give the puppy mixed messages, it's not going to get trained. And that's actually called intermittent reinforcement from a psychological point of view. So the best way to train is if you're really consistent. Every time X happens, you make Y happen. Because sometimes if you don't do it, then the bad habits, get quite strong. That will do with that one. Okay. So I'm reading the I'm just reading that one question. Okay, this question is, I have a problem with applying right effort when my mind rebels. From time to time, I have such a reaction, especially after calming my mind down or after some small discoveries about thoughts and the mind or being mindful. Then my mind gets very active. I think this is a reaction for calming down during the meditation, and then the mind rebels. And for example, I forget that I'm meditating. How to take care of the right effort in such reactions? Excellent question, and just perfect with our puppy analogy. Okay, so if your mind is the puppy and it rebels, it's a natural thing for it to rebel. It's what puppies do when they're not tamed. So you have to be kind to it, and you have to put the causes and conditions in place for it to be tamed. Okay, so with the here I'm seeing that I have, after I've made some discoveries about thoughts in the mind, to me that sounds a little bit like it's expectations, that you're expecting not to have those thoughts when you're meditating. But thoughts are just part of cause and effect. And so an untamed mind is going to have thoughts. And so it depends on what's been happening beforehand, you know, how you've come into the meditation, how you've prepared for the meditation. So you don't be a tyrant. You apply yoniso manasikara, wise attention, and you analyze it going back to the root. Not just, I've got a thought, I shouldn't have a thought, this is a bad thought, stop it, stop it, stop it, okay? And this is like, if that's your puppy, that's not going to work. You know that the puppy, if it's agitated or whatever, you actually have to get it to be calm. You have to put the causes in place first. Is that okay? Okay, I'm just, is that, okay, thank you. Okay, I'll just do another question since it's come up here. It says, you mentioned that right effort for lay people doesn't need to mean disenchantment with householder life. Sometimes I find myself very disenchanted with daily life after coming back from meditation retreats, and sometimes I struggle because of it. What's missing in my life that would create more balance between lay life and retreats? I have a wife and mortgage, patients, and many duties I have to perform, so going forth isn't an option for the foreseeable future. Yes, I think it's part of human nature to want to talk about the end of the path, about nibbana, about, you know, all of the really high states of meditation, neither perception nor non-perception, and, you know, signless this and whatever. And we just need to adjust the expectations, you know. Living a kind, contributive life is a valuable and wonderful thing. You don't have to aim for all of those things. And if we think about karma, you know, we want to ensure that we're going to have a good rebirth. Okay, so you want to act in such ways that's going to lead to good states in the here and now, as well as good states after we die. And really, these are all the practices of sila and also of mindfulness, because in order to practice sila, you actually have to be mindful about what's going on all around you. Okay, so you can't just be focused on me, you have to focus on other things. And, you know, I think, you know, there's nothing wrong with wanting to come back into the human realm, right? If you understand dukkha a lot, if you understand the first noble truth, you know, you might think that's not fantastic. But, you know, there's so many other wonderful realms. There's all the Deva realms. There's the Brahma Viharas. Huh? There's nothing wrong with that at all. And there's a sutta, and I can't remember which one it is, one of you might know, where Sariputta was assisting somebody just before they died. And he was telling him about the Brahma Viharas and bringing those things to mind. And that's because that's where the person wanted to be reborn. Now, the Buddha criticized him afterwards because he said that, you know, he could have had the capacity to go further, and that Sariputta aimed at that lower level. But I'm not telling you because that's right or wrong, but simply as an example that's normal, okay? You don't have to aim for cessation and extinguishment. It is okay to aim for a good, happy, contributive life. And I think that, getting back to what I said about how people's expectations are to be to the very top, that and in meditation retreats, anyway, the ones that I've been to, it always ends up being about the ultimate goal. And that's where the focus is. And also, I suppose, going back to the question about the noble training, in the suttas, so many of the suttas are for monks and nuns, the nobles who actually are practicing for the very end. But there are many suttas that are aimed at lay people, and they tend to talk about the earlier factors on the Eightfold Path. But I'll also say that you don't, I think that it's fantastic to focus on those and to practice those and put in effort to those, because as you do that, you naturally get deeper understanding, okay? And then you may naturally come to see and understand the Four Noble Truths better. And then the renunciation becomes a natural process. It's not a forced process. And I think that's very important, so that we're not forcing it. We're not jumping to the end, and that can actually make for contentment and happiness, because you have to be happy and content on this path every step of the way. If it's just going to make you miserable and you're just feeling that it's impossible, or, it's just about hard discipline, I think that's going about it in the wrong way. You want the puppy to be a happy puppy, and the happy puppy. And I've done quite a bit of dog training. I've had dogs all my life, and big, working dogs. And as they get trained in the little things, they develop and the skills increase over time, and they become happier animals. I've had animals that I've taken on as rescuing them from bad situations. And those animals with an untamed mind aren't happy and content. But those animals who do have a tamed mind are happy and content. So, and I think the way that I often approach this is, you can use suffering as a guide. So when suffering comes up in your life, okay, when there's something rotten happening in your life, that lets you know, hey, I need to adjust something. And that's where you start to use sati and yoniso manasikara, because you go back to the root of the problem. And this is a very important point, because I got distracted again. Someone put a Sutta quote up, very good. Because often we get distracted by trying to solve the problem. Okay, these are the surface issues, and our minds go round and round, and we try to find the perfect solution. But that's not yoniso manasikara. Okay, that's not really going deep enough. You're not tracing it back to the cause, right? So this is, again, we're coming now to the dependent arising, or the conditionality of things, because you need to go back and understand what is the cause of this problem. So if you're not a noble one, okay, if you don't have any right view, you think that the causes are by those external conditions. I'm unhappy because my girlfriend left me, right? And you try to figure out what went wrong and how you did this and whatever else. Yoniso manasikara means you go and you look at attachment, okay? It's not just those things. It's like, why am I upset about this? What is it in me that makes it upset? It's not just if I'd said this and if this hadn't happened. And I think some of you may have heard my analogy about the rain, right? You know, it's not the rain that was the problem. It was about the perceptions that underlied that. So you don't blame the rain, you go a little bit deeper and you actually look to see what it is. I don't know whether you know Yoniso Manasikara is wise attention, but it has this aspect of it which is about going to the source, going to the root of the issue. And this is actually the skill that the Buddha applied to come up with dependent origination. He says, what is the cause of this? This depends upon what? You know, if this, then this. If not this, then not this. And you got to see the causal relationships between things. And so that is part of right effort. In any circumstance where you have suffering is to actually look at it in that causal way, going back to the source. Yeah. Let me just have a look.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Am I at the bottom? I think I'm at the bottom. Okay. Any questions? So, Piotr, did you want to steer me in a particular direction? Or anyone else?
I think you have one more question. You have one more question, so.
Oh, right. Great. Alina. I am asking for tips on what the best methods are to improve our mind reactions to extreme situations, e.g., stress as a result of working with people with mental illness, psychosis, people with addictions whose disease causes a lot of chaos and stressful situations. For a person who is accompanying or working with it, I mean methods of working with my own internal reactions in extreme situations of strong stress that we cannot avoid at the moment. Oh, there's a lot in there. So what is stress? Okay, let's apply Yoniso Manasikara. Okay, what is stress? What causes the stress? Right? Why is it that in the same circumstance, one person will perceive it as stress and another person will not perceive it as stress? Right? Because this is the case, right? So my background is mental health. So I've dealt with all kinds of terrible things. I imagine that that you and I may perceive the same situation in a different way. One might perceive it as stressful and the other will not perceive it as stressful. So you actually have to go back and trace it back. What is it? What's your expectations? Expectations are really important, Where's your focus? What's the outcomes that you're wanting? Are the outcomes possible or impossible? Okay. Not only do we have little puppy minds, but everyone else around us has little puppy minds too. The further you are on the noble path, the more tamed your mind is. And it's not so much a little puppy, it becomes a wise creature. But everyone else around us has also got little puppy minds. So the expectations of how others should behave and, is an important thing, as is control, what you need to control, what's possible, what's not possible. So you can see in working backwards, I'm not just giving a set answer because the set answer depends on all of those things in the individual. It's your own perception. So you have to see how your perception works. Let me just have another read and another little think. All right. There's also another thing that comes up here, which is about shoulds. I should do this and I should do that. This is sometimes difficult in work environments where you are given a role and you're responsible for it. But again, I would say, as the Buddha says everywhere, focus on putting in the causes rather than focusing on the outcomes. So people with mental illness are very responsive to the environment that they're in and how you actually deal with them, like a little puppy, you know. If they feel threatened or scared or whatever, they're going to react in a particular way. If you can set up situations in a particular way, it diffuses the situation. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes things are very difficult. Does anyone else want to add anything there?
Well, I agree with what you said, that a lot of it is based on expectations, and I think this Ajahn Brahm method of just putting right effort into this trash can with the hole at the other end, so we can train ourselves on the smaller situations, but with time the mind gets trained, so even bigger situations can treat with equanimity. So I think it's just a process of learning.
Yes. Yes. No, that's right. Once it's finished, and you can only do your best, but you can review it to see what you can do better next time. And that's an important part of the contemplations as well. Now, here as well, it can be our expectations of other people, and, you know, so that you don't have ill will arising. So with these types of things, when we're talking about right effort, the things that we're also looking at, and this is in Majjhima Nikaya 2 as well, is we want to stop the defilements arising. So if you're getting anger, if you're getting ill will towards someone, if you're blaming and judging, you can use some of the contemplations that the Buddha had. So this is about being aware of conditioning, you know, and non-self, that the person isn't trying to be bad, that they're just conditioned in a way. They're doing the best they can. It just may not be very successful. And so you can have compassion for them. And again, that will then determine how you will work with them, to give them the skills to be able to react in different ways. So the defilements, you know, so it really depends what the stress is, what the details of that are. And when you're calm, it's a good time to contemplate it. You can also experiment. That's another thing with right effort. Sometimes the answer isn't immediately evident. And this is what I've used for my own training for all of these years, is you see what works, you know, because sometimes one thing will work and sometimes it won't. And so when you reflect, you're looking back to see what causes did I put in place? You know, what else could I put in place? If it didn't work, so if the bad you know, the defilements or the bad mind state didn't go down, you have to try another method. And if that doesn't work, you try another method. And if that doesn't work, you try another method. And you go down the list to actually work through what works. Yeah. So I think that's a good attitude to have, not just to think that there's one set answer, one set solution. You have to see what's going to work. And so you have to be a bit creative, and you can be creative about the solutions that you try to put in place for yourself. And again, this comes back to the memory part of sati, because then you will remember what worked in what situations, and you can revisit it. Yep.
Yeah, I think that there is. Yeah, sorry.
Yes, no, say, please.
That depends on the person, because some, as you said in the beginning, it all depends on our conditioning, because some are too loose and some are too tight, like the string.
Yes.
And the people who are too tight sometimes can have so many like expectation of themselves that they want to improve the world, but sometimes this actually goodwill becomes a hindrance, because if it's too much, then we like experience too strongly our let's say all this stress. And then for what helped for me in the long run was contemplating that not me, not mine, not a self, and that I can only influence so much, and then just let go, and that the life doesn't have to go the way I want, that I don't have to influence everything, and so this is works in the long run. And I think Adrian said that some breath methods can work in the short run. So this is what I would like to add. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yes, very good. And Katarzyna says, what works for me is the question about my intentions towards a situation. Are they appropriate? And Alina says, a small puppy, my mind, will be a big dog in the future, dangerous or safe when it is trained. Yes, that's absolutely right. What else? The mind is box breathing. Yes, all of these things. All of these things, and you're just creative, and there's another simile that the Buddha used that I really liked. It's used in a slightly different way, but he talked about when you're herding cattle. So, if you're the shepherd and you're watching out for the cattle, and when the crops are just young, you have to watch it like a hawk, and you're making sure the cattle don't wander anywhere. They only go to the right place. And when the crops are in, then the cattle can wander freely. And to me, this also relates to the puppy, because it is not good training to be harassing the puppy all the time with everything. And this is the expectations of being perfect, okay? Oh, mind, you did this. No, 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 no. You actually have to sort of relax a little bit and let it go a little bit, and not expect to be perfect all the time, and to have that little bit of fluidity, that little bit of forgiveness and fun, and not be a tyrant to your mind. It's yes. No. Let me just have a little look here again. I'm just going to read the next question. How could right effort look like in response to anger? Many people think anger is a bad feeling that shouldn't be experienced or should swiftly go away, and I've found it counterproductive on many occasions. It seems to lead to suppressing or repressing, and I wonder what's the wisest way to approach it. Okay, well, suppressing and repressing isn't very good. And that's just using the discipline and not yoniso manasikara. Yoniso manasikara has to go to the root of why the anger has arisen. What is it about your perceptions that causes the anger to arise? So the Buddha is unequivocal, really, that anger is something, that's one of the bad mental states, and you really don't want to be dwelling with anger. And often anger is directly a result of how we perceive something. So I think in situations like this, it's useful to actually talk about real examples. That's the difference between the theory and the practice. It's very easy to talk in theory, and then it's hard to apply in specific circumstances. So if you have a specific circumstance, we can talk about that, how anger arises in certain circumstances.
Thank you. Yes, I was thinking about this because I had a discussion with my close friend not so long ago, and we were talking about he's an artist and musician, and he's now embracing all his feelings, and he was always kind of suppressing anger and not allowing himself to express himself, and he was speaking how great it is. And I was thinking about myself also, how I was very angry for a long time, and I was able through the practice to let go of a lot of that, not everything obviously,
Fantastic.
but a lot of it. But I didn't know how to speak to him, in this situation. Should I tell him, something? But I told him that this is your part of the journey, and I have a different experience now. It seems to me that it's very unpleasant to be angry a lot, so I try to understand it, and if I can let go of it. But he doesn't seem to be convinced, so that's why I was asking this question.
Okay. See, he may not believe that it's possible to not be angry, because if your view is that certain behaviors and certain situations deserve anger, then you're going to think anger is a good thing. So this is going back to right view, okay? So understanding what leads to happiness and what doesn't lead to happiness. So it gets that basic. Often when I think about anger and the repressing, it's like putting the lid on a boiling kettle. At some point it's going to blow. The only way to stop it is to turn the heat off. So you actually have to get away from it. And you can do little exercises. For example, there was one situation, where, you got angry with somebody because they behaved really badly, okay? And you think they deserve me to be angry at them. How dare they behave like this? And then you find out that morning they got diagnosed with cancer and they have, 6 weeks to live, and they're just not coping very well, and they're being grumpy and horrible. And so your perception alters immediately. You can no longer be angry. So the anger is only because you have perceptions and you think that you're right and this is true. So, right? So if you can actually see that what you're perceiving isn't necessarily the whole truth, and so if you can show people that anger is not not the only way to react to certain situations, then you're starting to open their eyes to a possibility that you can actually live without anger, and that it can be good, and that you're not going to be a pushover, that it doesn't mean that you have to accept bad things that happen to you, but you just don't have to have an anger response. So I think it's just about exposing them to alternate ways of being, because a lot of people think that anger is good, It gives me energy, If I'm not angry, the world will be terrible. So, yeah.
We were talking about like ecology and protests, and I said that, this is, we can be peaceful, right? So we can be supporting something in a peaceful way. And we had a bit of a heated discussion around that. So I guess I got a little bit angry while talking as well. And it was kind of bugging me today. So I wanted to ask about it.
Yeah. And it's about those perceptions. So it's really going back to actually look at that. And this is, again, attention. So wise attention is when you focus on certain things, then you will get angry. So you actually have to move your attention to a different thing. I have a good friend. She's not a Buddhist, and she's very much into environmental issues. And so I've been talking to her, and she suffers a lot because she internalizes the anger. She gets stressed. She gets upset. And so her perception is been developed in such a way that wherever she looks, she sees the bad, right? And so if you're seeing the bad, that's going to impact you. So, and I'm talking to, you know how, if you've got a telescope or something like this, and what you're looking at, you need to move it to another thing. You need to actually look at something that will make you feel good. Okay, so you have to displace that thing, and that's a part of the discipline. Another thing I do with her is put on the bubble, because sometimes for her, the world is just too horrible. It's just, she can't cope. Everywhere she looks, it's really bad. So you put up a bubble so you don't let those bad things come in through the bubble. It's like your protective little shield, and you can have your nice perceptions inside the shield. It's just a slow process. And I think, even just giving an examples of how you can focus on things and change your focus, it helps people know that there's another way, because this is very foreign to a lot of people. They don't even believe that you can actually be, have equanimity, be, accepting.
Thank you for sharing that. I think what was very helpful for me was that the compassion element, to see that in everyone there is something to be compassionate about. And when we are very righteous and we feel just, then we don't see human suffering in other people. And that makes it's easy to get angry at them. And we have that. And yeah, that was very useful for me too, not only for my friends.
Yeah, no, and people, they're the result of their own conditioning, and they think they're doing a good thing. All right, it's just that they're not seeing the world clearly. They're confused, and they may actually be doing things, unwholesome, unbeneficial things that hurts them and everyone around them. So you can really have compassion, but they are basically doing their best, even though the outcome may not be good, right? Very few people have an intention to purposefully do bad things. They think at some level that it's actually a good thing to do for some reason.
Thank you very much.
I'm just going to have a look at the little questions. Sorry. I was wondering if there is a person that is pushing my buttons, I'm becoming irritated. Is it better to still meet those people and gradually get to the root of my irritation and recondition myself, or just skip meeting those particular person to avoid unwholesome states? Okay, well, it's always better to get over being irritated, okay, because then you're free. You can go wherever you want without worry, it's no longer a thing. So that's about reconditioning your perceptions. But sometimes it is wise not to expose yourself to those things at certain times. So you have to use a little bit of judgment there. You don't just want to run away from everything that's rotten or challenging. You want to actually tame your mind. You want to recondition perception so that those things pass over you just like a wave through the ocean. That they're not sticky. You're not grasping onto them. You can actually let them go through. So this is where you actually come up with different ways of viewing the situation and of viewing the person, and using Yoniso Manasikara to see, what are your buttons? Are your buttons good? Are your buttons something that needs some work? Yes. So I'd say that you always try to do that, and you try to recondition yourself. And if and often if you know that you're going to meet someone who triggers you, you're aware of it in advance, and then you can set yourself up with strategies of how to deal with it in advance. And then you can actually watch yourself and how you're reacting while you're interacting with them, and use that as data to get more insight into what's happening into you and to develop better strategies. I mean, I do that. There's people who set me off, and I have to remind myself. And, sometimes I'll remind myself about all of their good qualities before I go in, or about the fact that they're doing their best in, that they don't have the resources to make choices, to act in other ways. Yeah. Okay, and then there's a comment. Women globally do not express anger. This is what 80% of patients with autoimmune diseases are women. How to look at it from what you said? Well, I think that stuff, it's not so much about, you don't want to repress anger. You want to dissolve the anger. So repression isn't good. You want to resolve it, and there's a big difference in that. So the answer isn't just to be angry. The answer is to understand why you get angry and to change your perception so you can move beyond that. Does that make sense with regards to that one?
Yes, I think what can be said again is it's really about changing your perception. For example, you can see some qualities of your parent, only bad qualities, and you get angry, frustrated, and stuff like that. But if you change the perception to the good qualities and to their own suffering, you get compassion, and then you not repress anger, you just transform it to compassion. So this is about Viveka constantly is telling about changing perception. So I think this is the key element here.
It's the key element. So there's a number of different things, and I did jot some little things down, like common causes of suffering. And so, okay, so you've got one of the things is like sense restraint. So if you know that contact with certain things gives rise to the unbeneficial, then you have to restrain contact. Okay, you have to sense restraint. So, for example, if you're in a relationship and you find that you're being tempted to have an affair with somebody else, or you're really attracted, you'll stay away from certain situations that will bring those things out to you, because you know that contact will actually bring about states that you don't want to arise. So you want to minimize those external conditions that give rise to the bad states. It's like if, I was talking about my friend when she sees, environmental damage. So she has to, she wouldn't want to go and spend a holiday in the middle of a zone that was being clear felled, where the forest is being felled. That's not the place you go to relax because of how that is. Then there's the restraint of defilements. Okay, so this is where the anger is arising. And let's just, either greed, hatred, or delusion. And this is where you can use the different contemplations, so when your anger is there, you're angry at somebody, then you bring up the contemplations about how they're a conditioned being, how they're not in control, and which gives rise to compassion. So you do those types of contemplations. The same with the sense restraint one. It's also, you do the contemplations such as contemplating the gratification, the danger, and the escape. So when you feel certain unwholesome desires coming up, then you actually actively go into that mode at that time as the antidote. So if it's lust, you have to see, what the gratification is, short term, not very good, the danger leading to all of the problems that are going to happen, and the escape by actually moving beyond it. And if you want to change your perceptions, that's what it is. You can visualize the Ashubha practices. You can look for the unpleasant in the pleasant and the pleasant in the unpleasant, and actually change the way that you're perceiving things. So that's where all of those many, many, many instructions of the Buddha come from. And they get applied for this purpose, right? To keep the good, to make the good states arise and maintain them, and to not let the bad states arise, and also to maintain their absence. I was trying to think of a way to describe how the methods of right effort are so completely embedded through all of the suttas. And I was thinking it's sort of like carbon in matter, right? Because it's like an essential building block. And all of the suttas, all of the teachings, they're really aspects of right effort. They're examples of right effort. And by applying Yoniso Manasikara, you know which one to apply when. Okay. But with balance and mind as puppy, not being a tyrant, just continually doing these different things. And just while I'm on that, I might just say that it can be really overwhelming if you're wanting to be perfect across a whole stack of different things. You don't know where to actually put your attention to. And that's like that cow herd that is constantly poking the cows not to go where it shouldn't go. You want to choose the things that are most important. Okay, and this is, so if anger is an issue, you can focus on anger, and you can spend time and really look at that one issue. So, and then you can really work quite hard and in a focused way to recondition your perception. And again, it's like with the puppy, you're not going to train the puppy to do everything all at once. If you're teaching it a trick, you're going to teach it one trick or two tricks, and then you gradually expand the repertoire. Okay, you cannot try to teach it 50 tricks all at once. Okay, so you have to pick the most important ones. There's another thing that you can also do that causes suffering and arises bad states, and that's papancha, so the proliferation. When you catch yourself proliferating, you know that that's not going to yield to good results, and you just say, and that's the sati, all right? It's when you notice something and the little bell goes off, and then Yoniso Manasikara comes in. And you go back to the root, and then you do the reconditioning. It's just such a beautiful, natural process. Did you want to say something?
Well, I can say that I'm really grateful that you said all this because personally, I also talk a lot about right effort, and Ajahn Sona also says that you just don't get angry, you have to prevent and remove all these unwholesome states. And people oftentimes have misunderstanding that exactly that, he's talking about repression. But no, the Buddha haven't said you have to repress. He said you have to remove and prevent. But there are so many ways you can do this which are very wholesome, which is exactly this dissolving, changing perception, or whatever else that is in the suttas. So And one more thing is that actually in Majjhima Nikaya 117, Mahachattarishaka Sutta, the Buddha says that right effort applies to all 8 aspects of the Eightfold Path. So, for example, when you get right view, you get right effort to get right view, or right intention, right effort to get right intention, right speech, you get right effort to get right speech. So this is all in all aspects of the path is right effort, actually.
All aspects of the path is right effort. Any action is right effort, okay? So your actions, it's either wrong effort or right effort, and the right effort comes because you understand what leads to good states and what leads to bad states, which is why right view is the first aspect of the path, okay? And they feed into each other and you just get wiser. And I think that's why don't go to the end of the path. Don't set your expectations for the virtuoso performance. You've got to do these things first. You've got to tame in a systematic fashion and with kindness to yourself, because there are many people who torture themselves, and the world is unsatisfactory enough as it is. We don't have to torture ourselves as well. There are enough things out there that are difficult and cause suffering. We don't have to cause our own suffering. But it is that tricky thing, because it's that balance between too tight and too loose. But you just experiment, you just experiment. Okay. Let me just have a little look here. Oh, yes. Oh, actually, what I was talking about was something that I had down there. It was like examples of suffering and antidotes, but always using Yoniso Manasikara, not getting caught up in the surface things. Okay, so the bad desires, you use sense restraint. Arising defilements, you go to changing perception with all of the contemplations and where you focus, where you place attention. The papancha, understanding and properly valuing your views and opinions, and getting caught up in details, so the unsolvable problems. And you have to accept the limits of samsara, because that's another thing. And a lot of people think that things should be perfect, and they're just not. And once you realize this, you can accept it. And you let go of the impossible. What was that beautiful Ajahn Brahm quote? It's I can't remember exactly. Maybe one of you can remember, but it was about expecting the world to give you what is you can't give you. Expecting the impossible, and that's a really important thing, because a lot of these things come from our expectations that the world should be giving us certain things, but that's not the case. Did you want to say something, Piotr?
No, the quote is suffering is asking from the world what it can never give you.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. Oh, very good. There you go.
Well, I think one more thing that you could talk about is the removing the coarser peg with the finer peg, because this is very important. And I was also happy about the post that Ajahn Brahmali made on Sutta Central, because he wrote that lay people, like most people in the world, cannot do like purely bright karma, because you can only make purely bright karma when you have no hindrances. And most people have some degree of hindrances, so we can only choose the lighter shades of gray. And I think this is very important, because I found it in my practice to be extremely helpful, because on the one hand, I understand the problem, I understand the attachment and all this stuff, but you cannot just let go of everything at one day, because the habits of the mind are so strong. So we can actually choose the less unskillful things to replace more unskillful things. slowly, gradually, and this is like this going towards lighter shades of gray. And it actually really yields good results in my experience. So if you could talk about this, that would be great.
It really does. Yeah, because it's impossible just to stop. So you have to, and it's the same, you distract yourself. So, if you want to, you choose wholesome pleasures, okay, or just less bad pleasures. You know, I think you said it all, Piotr.
Yeah, I think it's also about anger, because sometimes we don't have to be like immediately full loving kindness. The Buddha said, if you cannot have loving kindness, you can have compassion. If you cannot have compassion, you can have equanimity. If no equanimity, you can just ignore. And if you cannot ignore, then just think that everyone will get the results of their karma. So it works not only for sensual pleasures, but also for other defilements. I think this is gradual path. So yeah, this right effort
Absolutely.
can be also, we can fall into this trap. Yeah, we want to be arahants already, act perfectly in every
That's
way,
it.
but then we can get actually frustrated with ourselves, and it's the loop is going on.
That's right. And then that becomes like, yes, it goes backwards because you're suppressing and you're denying and doing all of these things. So that's not skillful means. The skillful means is to do what's going to actually work. And it is a gradual thing. And, there's nothing wrong with pleasure, you know. It's just that you want pleasures that aren't going to harm yourself and others, and there is that tension, because if you want to be without desire, that's the goal, no more craving. But that's really not going to come for a long time. So you want to have desire for things that are going to be wholesome and good, and as long as it's not hurting anyone else, yep, yep. Well said, Piotr.
Thank you.
I'm just going to read. There's another question from Adrian. I've found that sometimes there are some conditions that aren't sustainable where need to probably change something to not get angry so often. We can't change others, though. We can only set boundaries and move away to create better conditions for ourselves. That's right. If we can't inspire them to choose something different, I made some choices like this and it was helpful for me. That's absolutely right. So there are some things that are impossible to change. And then you have to decide what the best course of action is. And it might just be, if it's so bad, that you remove yourself. And that's absolutely fine. And I know for myself, this is part of my character trait. I was conditioned to solve problems, and it was very difficult for me to accept that some problems have no solution. It was like, I just haven't found the right solution. But sometimes there are no solutions. And so you have to look at it really honestly and decide either you change something in yourself or you change the situation. And if it's a question of right and wrong or good and bad, then you don't want to change that. You want to stick with what you think is the right behavior. So well done. Well done. We can't change others. That's right.
There was a question about your name.
My name. It means seclusion, but it's not just physical seclusion. So that's kaya viveka. You also have seclusion, mental seclusion. You have seclusion from the defilements. And I have a little joke. my birth name is Mara. So I'm Latvian heritage, right? So Mara is a very common Latvian name. It's one of the goddesses of the pagan gods. And so I'm Mara. And so all Ajahn Brahm and all of the monks, that was quite a joke. That's here comes Mara. And Ajahn Brahm gave me my name Viveka, and sometimes I put it together, so it's Viveka Mara, so it's like secluded from Mara. Please feel free to ask anything or whatever. I'm sorry, I'm fading a little bit because I've had a very long day. But please ask whatever you would like. Will we meditate together? Is that like tonight?
Well, it wasn't planned at least, and I think, the main purpose of the meeting is to just ask questions and to hear some Dhamma. So,
yeah. So I don't know how successful this has been. This was my attempt to not do any planning and just to speak off the cuff. As I said, I wanted a more informal approach to actually talk to you all and see what issues you might be dealing with. So you can let Piotr or whoever know if this isn't a successful format, and we can alter it in the future. I'm just finding my feet, so I'm trialing different approaches and eventually we'll see what works.
I think it was very good, and I think we don't have to, to make every meeting 2 hours. So if you are like fading out and we asked already so many questions, I think we can call it a day.
Okay. It's really nice to see you all.
Yeah, and so
and
thank you so much for being there.
All the best in your practice, treat your minds like a little puppy, be kind, and just, constant discipline in a wise way with a kind approach. That will yield good results.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you so much for being there for us, and we hope for the next one.
Yes. All the very, very best to you all. Okay.